Tonight's live stream is brought to you by Rose & Kiernan, Insurance, Surety, and Benefit Services. Our community involvement is local. Our insurance protection is global.
I'm going to freeze residential property taxes and see what we have to work with.
I want to work with the city residents, community organizations, and civic leaders throughout the city to put together an actual plan for this city.
We're looking into the future and seeing what we can do here. This is a 22,000 square foot warehouse that we have started rehabbing as well as training our youth.
The number one real issue in my mind from a city's perspective, policy-wise, is the budget.
I'm going to bust up the sales tax agreement with the county.
We know that the city of Poughkeepsie is in dire need of a youth center.
On the buses, there will be a federal consent decree.
We shouldn't take 10 months to resolve something like the city buses when we've known about the issue since 2009.
This is the start of something I think very special.
Hello and welcome to our HVNN live broadcast in partnership with the Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce, coming to you from Change Point Theater in the city of Poughkeepsie. I'm Charlie Carnaccio along with Paula Mitchell as we bring you the at-large candidates in the city of Poughkeepsie's city council race.
Yeah, these three candidates have very dynamic and differing views, and the person who wins the at-large seat on the city council could have a dramatic impact on the city of Poughkeepsie.
Your candidates are Independent Mario Johnson, Democrat Ann Finney, and representing the Republican Party, Mike Young.
What adds to the interest in this race is the switch Mike Young has made from his former Democratic Party to the Republican Party.
That's right. You may recall that Mike Young lost his primary race to Ann Finney and then resurfaced as a Republican. And I'm sure there will be some discussion in tonight's live stream about that dynamic.
Yeah, and our moderators for tonight's forum are HVNN.com's political correspondent Roger Connor and President and CEO of the Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce, Frank Costello Jr.
So the stage is set. Once again, we welcome you to the broadcast. Let's now send it down to the floor and begin tonight's forum.
Thank you, Charlie and Paula, and welcome to both our online audience and our live audience here at Change Point Theater. The candidates this evening will be discussing the issues that are important and unique to this at-large position. They will be making opening statements and answering questions with 2 minutes given for responses and answers. I would like to introduce my co-moderator for this forum, the President and CEO of Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce, Frank Costello Jr.
Well, thank you, Roger, and thanks to HVNN.com for providing the platform for this important event. Part of the Chamber's mission is cultivating a strong local economy, advocating for businesses and organizations, being the union and voice for our 1,500 member constituents, and obviously, this includes the city of Poughkeepsie. As we begin our forum with the candidates, we want to thank them for their commitment, professional candor, cooperation, and willingness to lead. Please join me in welcoming our candidates for tonight's forum, beginning with Ms. Ann Finney, Mr. Mario Johnson, and Mr. Mike Young. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Before we get started, let us recognize our sponsors for tonight's event. They are Rose & Kiernan and Fortress Financial Advisory. We would also like to thank the Change Point Theater and ENS Professional for being our host this evening.
Earlier, the candidates drew straws to determine the order of opening and closing remarks. In order to eliminate distraction and in the interest of time and fairness, we would ask that the members of the audience refrain from making comments and to hold your applause until each candidate is finished speaking. So let's begin with opening remarks. And first off, Mike Young.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Frank, and thanks to HVNN and ChangePoint for hosting this forum. I think it's vitally important to get the word out to the public about this position. The candidate at large will be the chair of the Common Council and will set legislative agenda and restore order to our council, something that our council has lacked for quite a while. I think I'm the best person for that job because I have the experience and history of leading and maintaining order and understanding parliamentary procedure, and also working together with the administration to restore our budget back into logical working order, getting our Moody's credit rating back on track, bringing our 2018 budget under the tax cap, while simultaneously increasing services to our residents in vital areas that we need them in, like Department of Public Works, the Parks and Recreation budget with youth services, as well as ensuring that our vital services like the police and fire remain at full staffing. I think we face a situation where our council has lacked true leadership and lacked unity for quite a while. It's something that has caused us to lose certain grant opportunities. It's caused us to look a little bit like a laughingstock on the public stage, and I think we can do far better than that. The people of this city deserve better than that. And I hope that as the council chair, I will be able to serve all of the residents and bring us into a state where we can move this city forward with an actual legislative plan and actual respectable order.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Ann Finney, your opening remarks.
Thank you. I would say that this election is about money. It's about the tax revenues, the deficit, the city's financial relationship with the county. And I agree with Mr. Young. There has been some lack of consensus, certainly in the Common Council, but I think that is due to the administration's failure to fully advise the Common Council of the financial and legal and business issues they're asked to decide about. I'm particularly qualified to elucidate the financial and legal issues so that people on the Common Council are better able to make decisions. I find that consensus is a lot easier to achieve if we're starting from a common understanding. So I'd like to emphasize my belief that there is simply not enough tax revenue in Dutchess County to provide a $60 million surplus, full services, predictable tax, property tax and sales tax levies, and that our deficit is a symptom of overambition on the part of the county and now, unfortunately, the mayor, that they can bankroll cash to buy a bond rating, basically. And I think that it's just too ambitious financially, and it's better to concentrate on the cards we have, the services we can pay for, and not be too concerned about, you know, some abstract financial services rating.
Thank you, Ms. Finney. And Mario Johnson, your opening remarks.
As a former Fifth Ward alderman, as well as the vice mayor for 1 year when I was on the city council, I also served 3 terms as a Dutchess County legislator. I think out of all 3 candidates that are sitting here, I think I'm the most qualified, I have the most experience, as well as the academic credentials in Master's in Public Administration and Urban Policy and City Management. I am concerned, like many of you, about how our budget and our fiscal matters are handled. I'm worried every time about our vulnerable populations, whether they have to walk across the street or try to take a taxi or a cab to go somewhere to get their food. I'm really concerned about the shootings that have happened here in our city and how the lack of economic development and employment opportunities continue to dwindle. I'm concerned about our reputation as a city. As people look at our Common Council, and I agree with Mike, yes, there's a lot of chicanery going on. It's out of control, and to use your words, basically, at the last meeting, that our Common Council lacks the leadership. It lacks the honor that it used to have when I was on the city council. This happens because apparently the parties, the individuals, cannot see the common good for our city. I had the experience when I was on the Common Council to reach across the aisles, to work with the Republicans, Tom O'Neill, Scott Volkman, and others to be able to move the city forward. We put aside our petty differences to be able to make sure that our city was well taken care of and financed and managed. We had working relationships with everyone. This is a very pivotal election, especially in this seat, because this chair is more than just managing the budget. This person has to be a leader who will be able to build consensus, work together as a team, be able to see a vision, be a person for everybody that's in the city, as well as be the person that's a go-to person to bring our nonprofits and our religious organizations together to pull our city up from its bootstraps.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. As the format for tonight, each question will be answered by each candidate, and they will have up to 2 minutes for their response. If we as moderators feel it's necessary to ask each candidate for a 30-second follow-up comment, we will do that. We'll alternate the order for each person in response to tonight's questions. So let's start off. Let's start off by getting the elephant in the room dealt with, or should I say the donkey in the room, party affiliation. We have 3 candidates here who were or are Democrats. We also have a faction within the Poughkeepsie Democrats that began with the mayor's budget vetoes and grew wider with the issue of merging the city bus systems. So I'd like to start with Mike Young. Mr. Young, set the stage for us. Please tell us about running on the Republican line as a registered Democrat.
Well, Roger, it's a crazy world we live in. I am, as you noted, a registered Democrat, and I've been one my entire political life, from 18 years of age and on. It's something that I hold true to. I believe in the ideals of our city's democratic platform. And in fact, our city's democratic platform had in it, when I ran, that we wanted to investigate shared services and avoid petty territoriality, was the wording in our city's platform. It turns out that, as you noted, there's a bit of a faction in the Democratic Party that disagrees with that party platform, or disagreed with that party platform, and has made a concerted effort to make changes. So I, as you noted, lost the Democratic primary, but 200 Republicans showed up to the polls and wrote my name in. I felt, after seeing that and after hearing a large outpouring of support from the folks in the Democratic Party who felt that I still did reflect the democratic ideals at the city level, that I should continue to run. And I'm on the Reform Party line as well as the Republican line, so people can vote for me there as well. I find at the end of the day, when you're talking about what's going on inside of a city is like the city of Poughkeepsie, a small city, that the party lines, the things that go on at the national level, don't really have a bearing on what we do here at the local level. Mm-hmm. You don't really care whether the person has an R or a D next to their name when they're filling your potholes or making sure that the parks are clean or that sanitation comes and picks up your garbage. And I think those things need to continue to happen. I'm willing to bet that those 200 Republicans who wrote my name in recognized that I had good fiscal sense, and that was the reason they backed me.
Thank you. Now, Mario Johnson, a registered independent. You've been running on a campaign slogan, "Don't vote party, vote for the person." Please elaborate for us.
Well, first I want to say, I was at NOE, and I had an opportunity to basically do an interview with the Independence Party, and they endorsed me. And I remember one question they asked me, "Mario, if you were to get the endorsement of our party, will you seek the Democratic Party or would you seek the Republican line?" I said neither, because I am true to the team that I represent. I'm not the guy who wears a Yankee uniform and throw on a Met hat. Mike, you really got to tell the truth here. There was a palm card that went out to all the constituents basically saying support the Republican candidate as a write-in. We saw that. I would say this, you have to have respect for the process. When I was a county legislator and I lost to Barbara Jeter Jackson, she beat me in the primary. Only 125 people came out. I had to step aside because that's the process that we have. I respected the process. I respected the party rules. I respected the candidate to move out of the way and let her move forward. I even had to have the respect for the voters who says, we want Barbara to be the next person. That's the democracy we have. Those are the rules. That's the process that we stand by. And I really think that there really should be 2 people at this table, not 3. Because Ann Feeney beat somebody in a Democratic primary and won. The true Democrat should have stepped aside and basically let that person move forward to the debates tonight and to the election. Now, I'm kind of a little, disturbed about that, because without the respect, I really wonder for people that are out there, is this candidate, is Mike Young really a Democrat or is he really a Republican? As independents, I say vote the person, because I want to make sure everybody knows my credentials, where I stand, regardless of what the issue is, to be able to be the neutral person in the room to make things happen. I think we need to get away from the politics because it has sunk our city.
And now I turn to Ann Finney. Ann, you have been campaigning as the true blue Democrat in this race. Would you share your take on this party affiliation?
Well, I'm going to disagree with Mike. I think even at the local level, the party line, the party affiliation is very important. None of us can ignore the discipline of the local Republican Party, both in terms of their voting and their turnout and their support of the county executives' programs and financial objectives. And I'd like to take this occasion to remind people that the deficit is a function of a sales tax agreement that we got from the Republicans, and the cash that is represented by this deficit is sitting in a Republican-controlled county surplus. It's, I just don't agree with Mr. Young's take on this at all.
We'll be coming back to talk about the deficit specifically, but I'm going to turn it over to Frank to introduce the next topic.
Sure. Now let's talk about the bus merger, if we may. There's still an estimated charge of $1.9 million from the federal government looming over the city in 8 buses sitting unused in a garage. What next steps should the Common Council be taking to remedy this situation? And if it cannot be resolved, how do you suggest the city pay for it? Each candidate will be given 2 minutes, starting with Mr. Johnson.
Okay. First, I want to say that the bus situation was nothing more than a political setup from the word go. The mayor and the Common Council members, which Mike was a part of the Finance Committee, basically left a hole in the budget. The mayor only funded the buses for 6 months. That's like somebody saying, I really want to build a house, but you know what, builder, come back 6 months and put the roof on. Obviously, we know that when it comes down to budgeting, you have to make sure expenditures equal revenues. To fund it halfway was pretty much the setup from the word go. In order for the county to order those new buses, it has to be in a year in advance. So this was already kind of a, kind of a ploy already going through, or kind of a plan already going through before it actually started consolidating. As of right now, we may be stuck with that $1.9 million. And I'm looking at the budget and the budget message from the mayor and the Finance Committee that says, we right now have not funded that. Well, that means that the budget is not actually whole, because if the Federal Transportation Administration says, we want that $1.9 million. Everything that's in that budget, the police, the recreation, the DPW, all that stuff is gone. We will have to find that $1.9 million before January, or we're going to play kick the can down the road, pass the elections, as well as pass into the new year. We need to take a look at it now. How do we lease those buses, sell those buses, or even give them away to the point we're running some type of secondary transit system here in this city or even in the county? We have to take a look at how we get out from that $1.6 million. And let me just say this. When I was a county legislator and city councilman, I begged so much to the state and to the federal government that my hands look like cups. Somebody needs to get on the phone and really start working it to the point to say, how do we get from under this? The city council did not do their homework. When they found out about this, it was late. They should have been on top of it, but they did not do that. They let this go because the plan all along was to give the buses to the county.
Ms. Finney, what next steps should the Common Council be taking to remedy this situation?
Well, the Common Council has presented the mayor with a lease proposal which will take any risk of penalties off the table. I'd like to take issue with your characterization of a looming charge. There is no looming charge. There hasn't been even finishing the investigation of the county's bus routes. I was in a meeting with the mayor, and everyone was comparing notes. Have you heard of anybody ever having to pay a recapture penalty? And going around the room, there was no reliable report that these recapture penalties had ever been imposed. In fact, the state comptroller told the chair of the Common Council they've never heard of a recapture penalty being imposed. So it's not looming. I will also say that planning for the federal asset dispositions was one of the first issues the City Transportation Committee, pointed out in February. And it wasn't addressed by the administration. It wasn't addressed. Now, and I have to give the mayor credit for this, he's looking at the lease proposal, which most counties use to have better control over their transit assets. So I don't think there's any looming penalty, and I don't believe the mayor does either, because it's not in the budget. It's not even in the budget as a contingent liability.
Mr. Young, what steps should the Common Council take to remedy this situation?
Well, I'm going to come right out and say it, that we need to get the buses out of the garage, transfer them over to the county so they can be put back on the roads for our city residents. They do no one any good in a garage. They don't serve our residents, and they threaten our taxpayers with $1.9 million of potential liability. It's absurd simply to say that we're going to hold these buses in a garage as if it gives us some benefit. They need to be moved, they need to be transferred over. I've tried multiple times, voting yes every time to try to get them transferred. And at every stage of the journey, there's obstruction. I'll point out that if the council had an up and down vote, they would be transferred. We've had 4 votes in favor for quite a while. And for every vote, someone is either absent or abstains and chooses to obstruct the process instead of letting the process flow according to our charter. That's something that needs to stop. And I don't think we need to budget for $1.9 million in the next year, because we need to get them off our books now. It's something that is just mind-boggling when I talk to residents about why these buses are parked in the garage. It doesn't really make any sense whatsoever. I think that the lease proposal is something that's great. We actually had it before us on Monday's meeting. However, it wasn't allowed to be put before the council. It was again obstructed so that we didn't vote on it. We had it on our desks and didn't vote on it. I think time and again, you notice we've been working on this for almost a year now, and every time it's let's delay the process. Let's ask for a few more months. Let's kick this thing and table it to the next meeting. We need to get our act together and do it now and do something.
I sense a desire for follow-up comments, so I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to add any additional information, and we'll go in the original order. So, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, you know, this isn't the bus issue is not something that just came up overnight. They actually had 3 years to study it. If there was a chairperson there, or a chair of the Common Council or the mayor, they should have those plans on the table, whether to see if they can shrink the routes, whether they say they can eliminate those routes that are not producing, whether they can take the buses into different directions down the Beacon and have special shoppers routes to make revenue. Nobody would give away buses for free. We have to understand this was initially ready to give this to the city, give this to the county for free, and it didn't make sense, especially if you're in debt already.
Johnson. Thank you. Ms. Finney.
I'd like to follow up on Mario's point. The county wants the buses for free, which will generate a $1.3 million capital loss, which will flow through the general fund into the net position. It will increase our deficit.
And Mr. Young?
Well, I disagree with that statement. Our financial advisors, the Office of the State Comptroller, our credit agencies, outside accountants, all of them have mentioned that moving the buses, consolidating the buses, approaching shared services is the way to go. The Fiscal Restructuring Board has given us money to do it. The council rejected $300,000 in funds to do it. It's something we have to do.
Okay. Let's continue on the subject of the city budget and drill down a little deeper. Given the possibility that there is a $1.9 million being owed to the federal government on top of an $11.9 million deficit with no fund balance or reserves, what specifically would be your approach to getting the city out of this large financial hole? And we'll begin with Ann Finney.
Well, first, I would not say that we have the 1.9 million. We haven't gotten anything from the feds saying they want 1.9 million. In fact, the mayor said he calls every week and they don't return his calls. So the 1.9 million, as we know, when you have a dispute with the federal government, you get a demand letter, you rebut, you have a hearing. It takes years. So I don't think that's a today problem. The rest of the deficit, I think we just live with it until we can have some serious renegotiation of the sales tax agreement with the county. As I said, there's not enough money for the county to have $60 million in surplus and expect the localities to make up the difference. And the deficit is a glaring indication of that fallacy of the counties.
Mr. Young, what specifically would be your approach to getting the city out of its financial difficulties?
Roger, I have to just say that I think it's completely irresponsible to suggest that we can let our debt and deficit just sit there until we get some money given to us by outside agencies. Time and again, we've been waiting and relying on grant money to get our city back out of the hole, and we need to really ensure that our budget is stable to do that ourselves. And with regards to the 1.9 million, if we have to, I certainly do not want to see our city employees lose their jobs. I certainly do not want to see us have to raise taxes again, 7% to make that up. At the end of the day, if it falls, we're going to have to look really hard at contingency. We're going to have to look at shutting down some services, things like whether or not we shut down a firehouse, whether we shut down city parks and hand them over exclusively to volunteers. These are things no one wants to have happen, and I don't want to see it come to that. In terms of whether or not the federal government has ever recaptured funds, there's plenty of examples of it, and they don't have to come to the council and demand money. They go straight to the Treasury and take from our other grant money. So we get grants for police officers, we get grants for community development block grants to improve our sidewalks and our streets. They can put a hold on those monies at the Treasury, and we won't be able to pull down on them. That I do not want to get our city into that state. We need to resolve this transit issue by transferring those assets or leasing them or doing something as soon as possible.
And Mr. Johnson, what specifically would be your approach to getting the city out of this financial situation?
I have to concur with Mike Young when he says that, we just can't live with the deficit. That is killing our bond rating and also impacting our ability to be able to borrow money, especially when we need to do capital projects and improvements. We need a grant writer. We've been talking about a grant writer for a number of years. The last grant that was wrote was for $1.1 million from Nubian Direction Youth Build that were able to help our youth. On top of that, there was another grant that I wrote with Nubian Direction for $4.5 million that enabled a work project of 175 people to clean out our Fall Kill Creek. A grant writer is essential to our existence and to our financial operations, because without a grant writer, we cannot actually continue to raise taxes. In the last 3 years, in 2015, it was 7% increase. 2017, it was 16.5. This year, 1.8. That's 25% in the last 3 years. I almost forgot about it until I looked it up, but then when I looked at my wallet remembers. And it remembers clearly, because we continue to spend and tax and spend and then try to figure out, how are we going to get resources? With a grant writer, that is just one piece. We have to also look at our nonprofit agencies where they can help us do some of the heavy lifting. There's nonprofits that help clean Main Street, nonprofits help clean the parks. There's a number of things that we can do to be able to partner with to lower the costs until we start turning around our finances. We also have to look at the budget and look at those salaries and look at how we've been able to budget over the last 4 years, continuing to add 3% on top of this, 3% on top of that. We need to make sure our managers and department heads are accountable. Give them the raises based on their ability to be able to cut revenues and be creative to generate new revenues. We cannot sit here and call a surplus when we're really in debt. That's nothing more than, I would say, vacancy factor, monopoly money. If I don't fill a position, I have $80,000 because that person has not filled a position. We really need somebody who's going to take a hard look at the budget, sift through it, and cut out some of the fat and some of the paybacks.
Thank you.
Our next topic has to do with the role of the at-large council member. This is a new position created during last year's charter review, and it's a very powerful leadership position on the council. The at-large member also becomes chair of the Common Council and controls the agenda. To each candidate, why are you the best qualified chair of the Common Council? We will begin with Mr. Young.
Thanks, Frank. I believe I'm the best qualified because I have prior experience in leading groups through the use of parliamentary procedure like Robert's Rules of Order. So many of you have heard of that. We've talked about it at the council primarily because we don't really follow it. And it's something that we desperately need. I'll tell you, I've heard stories from folks who have looked at investing in the city of Poughkeepsie, and they've brought up our website, they've brought up a meeting, and they've said, what are the topics that are discussed at our city council meetings? And they see that our council is in shambles, and we have people shouting from the audience. In the most recent meeting, that person shouting from the audience happened to be a council member. It's totally, as in the words of one of my colleagues, a circus, and it's something that we need to put a stop to. I have experience with the Hudson Valley Federal Credit Union's Policy and Governance Committee, where we wrote policies to ensure that the credit union fulfilled its mission to serve its members. And I'm now on their supervisory committee. I'm a manager at IBM where I lead a team. Before that, I led an international team of several people who provided support for our enterprise customers. I believe we can get ourselves back into order and progress forward, talking about actual issues and making things actually move forward in the city, getting things done. That's something that needs to be done by the chair as part of an agenda, as part of a plan, and it's something that can be achieved through orderly meetings, through work sessions like committees of the whole, which other municipalities have, through sessions where we hash out the details of topics before they come before the council on the floor, and where we can actually run our true meetings as business meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Johnson, why are you the best qualified chair for the Common Council?
Okay, I'm a little miffed. Mike, you're part of the Common Council, so when I hear the craziness, the chaos, and the rest, I really wonder what you're doing to bring some type of peace, some type of understanding in the Common Council when you have Common Council members shouting down each other. I really wonder about your leadership skills in doing that. As a former vice mayor of the city of Poughkeepsie, we had basically classes that we were able to attend prior to taking office, and that we were able to talk about how we conduct business, official business, how we talk to one another, how we respond to one another. What has been lacking on a Common Council is leadership, and I think it is. But it's not the leadership buzzword that we throw out. It's really understanding, it's really cooperation, it's building consensus. It's really building teamwork, regardless of the party you're on. Somebody needs to be able to get there, and I think I'm the best one for that because I have the proven leadership ability to do that. When we were on a budget and finance committee, all of us worked together to make sure we put the common good of the city of Poughkeepsie first. That's what's lacking on the Common Council. I would never sit there and have members shouting someone down. Use your Robert rules that you talk about to take that recess, to regroup not only just the audience, and maybe even bring a sergeant at arms in like we had to do one time when we had the Gus Cazolias get crazy with us to say, you're no longer welcome, we're going to shut it down. You talk about Robert's rules, that's very simple. I teach my students that, and they know who goes first, how you move a motion. But apparently it's not being used because they may not have those classes that I had when I first started about how to conduct real business meetings. If I am the chair of the council, that would be something that we're going to make sure that our council members are well aware of, so we conduct our meetings, so we make sure we do not get caught off in these long-winded conversations, and the disrespect would stop. That's what's lacking. There's no one there to stop the disrespect, not only between each other, but also with the public. The public will react based on what the Common Council does.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Finney, why are you the best qualified candidate to chair the Common Council?
Well, I want to say, I agree that the council is fractious. It definitely is, but I think that is because the council members feel they have been, all of them, as regards each other, feel they have been misled and ignored, and especially on the implication of the issues that are presented, legal, financial implications, there's a lack of clarity about what the topic is, and all the Common Council are guilty of presenting things and not fully explaining it. So people get annoyed or worse because they think they're being hustled to decide something they're not ready to decide. I'm very good at explaining things, and I am good at listening. Probably the different from these gentlemen, I don't think you can control elected adults, representative of the diverse population of the city with the handbook from Robert's Rules of Orders. I think you're going to have actual substantive working relationships which come from listening and making sure everyone understands what the issues are before asking them to vote on them or to agree with you. And sometimes, as you say, Mr. Young, you can't get a decision on the buses. Perhaps it's time to accept that there's not going to be a decision on the buses and to move on. So I recognize these issues differently from how these gentlemen do, and I think those are essential qualities to recognize and present this perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Finney. We would like to give 30 seconds to each candidate for a further response. Mr. Young.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to take issue with the idea that I can single-handedly put a stop to the fractious nature of our city council today. We have a chair, but no vice chair. We haven't been able to even resolve that item, which was something that we set out to do on January 2nd. There is plenty of times where I have raised points of order, which is the process under Robert's Rules, and the rules of the room are only as good as the chair who enforces them. We have members of our council who get up and walk out of the room.
Excuse me,
Mr. Johnson.
Oh, 30 seconds. When I was vice mayor, there was no vice to the vice mayor. Basically, you had command and respect of the room because there was an understanding that we were there for business. If we didn't understand something, there would be caucuses, and that we can actually reshape ourselves as well as discuss the issues freely and going into caucus so we didn't come out and look like fools in front of the public as well as the cameras. We worked hard to make sure that we presented the facts to ourselves before we got to the meeting, and that was the issue. And if somebody did not enforce the orders, then you would have to do that.
Ms. Finney?
I have nothing to add.
Thank you.
Then I'd like to continue on this subject of leadership, but give it more of a bent towards the business community. I think we can all agree here that from your comments and your opening remarks that confidence in the Common Council's functionality is at an all-time low. This does not reflect well on potential investors or those helping to determine grant funding. So how would you, as the leader of this body, work to change that perception? And we'll start with Mr. Johnson.
In order to really have economic development and business prosperity in the city of Poughkeepsie, we have to really start with safety and security first. We all know when the city of Poughkeepsie has a shooting, that's just another person who says, I don't want to invest in Poughkeepsie. If we have another shooting, that's another person who says, I'm not going to stop at a local store to get a sandwich or even buy a cup of coffee. It is sad what has happened to our Main Street. As people drive down Main Streets and basically they look like they're about to lose the front end of their car because our roads are not paved and the stores do not have the appropriate signage and our stores are boarded up and abandoned, that right there is a deterrence to any future business. When we have building departments who are going to be heavy-handed in various building permits as well as the fees that are attached with it, that's not business friendly. We have to really take a new approach to the way we actually try to maintain our businesses as well as recruit our businesses. But if we continue to have random acts of violence or violence in our community, that does not help. This has been an ongoing issue for the last 30 plus years since I've been a resident in the city of Poughkeepsie. We all know that one shooting, once that happens, economic revenues, economic opportunity is lost. Nobody wants to invest in a city that's unsafe. If we do not get the tax revenues that we need, because we do have a poor tax deal that was basically negotiated by the city for the county, that money is gone. We need to take a look at that. because that's the only way we're going to be able to attract businesses. The Poughkeepsie IDA, the Poughkeepsie Alliance, they do try. And they're also going after grants to be able to spur some type of economic development. I was there years ago when the Poughkeepsie Partnership had 16,000 people come out for International Food Fest. Our city was safer, our city was cleaner, the roads were paved, the stores were open. We really have to start looking at that combination that made it work. That means we have to pull in other organizations as well as state agencies to say, how can they do the heavy lifting? Because apparently the lack of ideas and economic development initiatives are not coming from the Common Council.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Finney.
If I understand it correctly, your question was regarding the confidence of the business community in the Common Council.
And how you would change that reputation that the council has as its leader.
Well, actually, I've had business people reach out to me in this campaign, and it isn't the Common Council that concerns them. It's the sort of bump and run approach of some of the other agencies, planning and zoning and like that. So I would say, at least for those issues that have been brought to my attention, that we need to be a little more rigid in enforcing the codes we do have so that there is predictability for business people looking at the city of Poughkeepsie. I'm not sure that someone who's prepared to invest any significant amount of money is going to be too concerned about personality disputes at the Common Council. He's looking at what is the zoning code, what is the tax predictability, and yes, what's the crime rate and what's being done to address that. So I would focus a little bit more on the direct concerns that at least I have been on the receiving end.
And Mr. Young, as leader of the Common Council, how would you work to change its reputation within the business community?
So I think the first thing that we need to take on is an actual look at our patchwork policies that we have throughout the city of Poughkeepsie. We have issues where we haven't had a planning and economic development department in the city of Poughkeepsie for quite a while. The county has been kind enough to lend us a planner, and in the 2018 budget we have started that department back up. That takes a big step forward, because businesses that look to come to our city reach out, and they need to have a contact. They need to have someone who can guide them through the process. So, as chair of the council, I think that is one of the number one items that shows up on the list for the legislative agenda that we need to have in this city. We need to put together and ensure that our IDA and our planning board, our planning and economic development departments, and all of the agencies are talking together to guide new businesses into our city, to bring them forward and help them set up and establish themselves downtown. I also think the current setup on where our downtown is divided up between all the wards lends itself to a bit of a problem when people reach out to their councilperson and their councilperson does not respond. That's something that I've heard from our downtown businesses, and something that I think we can help work towards by fostering some of those groups that form. We have Middle Maine, we had Downtown Poughkeepsie Partnership that were created to try to get the community together to build a downtown business district. And I think that that's something that we need to continue to support and drive forward, something that the council chair can truly achieve by providing that guidance, providing that whole city outlook on what's important.
So the Chamber and many other organizations have been working to attract conferences and events to the city. Attendees patronize our businesses, including hotels, catering facilities, rental companies, and restaurants. Loitering, safety concerns, garbage, and inoperable parking systems plague this city. Parking facilities and hinder further attraction to our beautiful city. What specifically would you do to commit to supporting these events and improve public safety, cleanliness, and parking amenities? We'll start with you, Ms. Finney.
Okay, there's a big difference between adequate parking and 89 unsolved shootings on the north side. So when you're talking about public safety for events, I assume you mean relatively routine police protection for business activities. Is that correct?
Sure. Loitering is a major concern in downtown Poughkeepsie?
Well, the city's just passed an anti-loitering ordinance, and so we'll see how that works. And in fact, Mr. Young is chairing a committee to look into parking inadequacy. Parking is a problem in part because of the configuration of the city. There's just not that much parking space left. So it's a difficult problem, and I'm not going to guess what the answer should be right now. I'm really not prepared to address that.
Okay. Mr. Young, what would you do to commit to supporting the city's events and improve safety, cleanliness, and parking amenities?
So I'll address the comment regarding parking first. I'm not the chair of the parking committee. That's Councilwoman Sherry. And I'm not actually a member of the parking committee, but I do have some ideas. And I know that we're doing a parking study that's going on right now. It's available on the city's website that we invite everyone to take the survey to tell us about parking. It's something that's huge. I think the very first thing we can do, the easiest and most obvious out of the gate, is to encourage people to move to our city lots. We have quite a bit of surface parking in the city of Poughkeepsie, but we price it such that on-street parking is cheaper than moving to a lot, which is the exact opposite of what we should be doing from an urban planning standpoint. Those are tiny, that's a tiny little item, but it's one that I expect to come out of this study that we will start moving forward. In terms of an anti-loitering law, we didn't actually just pass that. That was a panhandling ordinance, an aggressive panhandling ordinance, something that we wanted to put a stop to ensure that people weren't being accosted when they came downtown. And that's something that I still stand by. I think we need to ensure that people are able to peaceably walk through downtown, are able to get to the stores and businesses that we have without being followed, without being confronted, without being threatened at ATMs. And that's what that aggressive panhandling ordinance put a stop to. I want to continue those sorts of initiatives, and I think the best way to do that is to work with the businesses, actually reach out to them through organizations like the Downtown Poughkeepsie Partnership, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, of course, and a few other groups where businesses are getting together and providing us with insight into what it is that they most need. We got $700,000 to improve the Financial Plaza parking deck, and I think improvements like that, including more Mural Square, are the types of things that will really get businesses going.
Mr. Johnson, what would you do to commit to supporting city events and improve safety, cleanliness, and parking amenities?
Well, number one is working with the various nonprofit organizations. When I see the loitering over in Mural Square and throughout the city, putting another law in the book is not going to move the 25% poverty rate that we have in the city of Poughkeepsie, or the 5.5% unemployment that we have. The aggressive panhandling, well, that means we really have to start calling on the county and calling on the county really to provide mental health services and other types of service to make sure that people have the resources they need in our city, so we don't have to continue to have our visitors being accosted by panhandlers. It makes no sense when I hear you talk about we need a parking study. There's so much parking in Poughkeepsie. It's just the fact that people don't want to walk. And if you wanted to walk around the corner, there's plenty of parking. But the city has to charge. And that's something you have to understand, because in the budget, there is $1.something million, $1.5 million that we're hoping to capture, not only on parking fees with the meters, also the fines and everything else. That revenue source is key towards us balancing the books. But we got to look at how do we have free parking events for people who are coming into our city. How do we make sure it's accessible to those who basically are disabled or those who are elderly and need to be closer to the venues? It does not make any sense basically to have every Monday morning, Sunday, I go out to my job and I work at Nubian Directions across the street from Dunkin' Donuts, and I walk down the street and I see nothing but litter and garbage. If it wasn't for the volunteers and the young people that are going out there on a regular basis picking up the litter, our city would be that much dirtier. If they're not out there cutting the weeds back and everything else, we have to look at our resources and see what can we do to get a bang for our buck, to make sure that our parks, make sure that our gardens are beautified, make sure the litter is picked up. It's about really creating strategic partnerships with the city, with the nonprofit agencies, with youth groups, as well as church organizations to buy in to revitalizing our downtown area. Because if our downtown does not look attractive, no one's going to spend money. I cannot buy a pair of jeans in the city of Poughkeepsie, not because of my size, because nobody sells them. And we need to start looking at bringing back those small businesses. And I will say this, Beacon is the light of the Hudson Valley because they did those things. They addressed their loitering, they addressed the drug use, they addressed the homeless, they changed the zoning. They did everything they needed to do to become economically prosperous right now, to the point they're actually trying to stop some of the development. We haven't done that. We just basically, if we just push it under the rug year after year, our poor continue to walk amongst us, and we continue just to turn a blind eye
Mr.
to what's
Johnson,
going on
you.
in the park. Thank you.
I'd like to continue, but obviously there's not enough time. We are almost coming to a close, and I want to thank our three candidates. And now we'll begin with our closing statements, and each candidate will be given 2 minutes for that, and we will begin with Ms. Finney.
Okay, well, as I said, I think this election's about money, about managing our money in a modest fashion. It will take quite some time to work out the deficit and some time to rebalance our relationship with the county, but it's time now to accept that there's not enough tax revenue in Dutchess County for the current relationship we have with the county and the expectations that we can support the county's budget surplus, not raise our own property taxes, resolve the deficit, not suffer in terms of services. All of that is far too ambitious, and I'm suggesting a more modest and skeptical approach towards the city's finances and these silver bullet solutions.
Next up, Mr. Young.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, Frank, and Roger, and HVNN, and the Chamber for hosting this event. I disagree with my opponent that we need to rest on our laurels. I think we are ready to move forward, and we can do that as a city. We have put together a budget that is under the tax cap. We have put together a budget that has reasonable revenues that are estimated based on actual facts for the first time in quite a while, something our credit agencies and advisors have advised us to do. We're actually meeting the needs of residents by adding an additional DPW shift on the weekends to ensure that our city is kept clean. We are taking on some of the complaints we've heard from businesses and residents that we need to improve our parks and recreation. We've added funds for youth services. These are all things we can do and we're doing right now, and we need to move forward on them. This constant harping on the same issue over and over again, the obstructionism, the lack of getting anything done in our council is something that we can put a stop to. The people of the city of Poughkeepsie have an opportunity to elect a council chair who can actually drive things forward. I've shown that I'm doing that. I'm actively working to try to improve this city. I believe we can. I have the belief in the city of Poughkeepsie that we're ready and we need to start doing it now. So I ask for everyone's vote on November 7th, and if anyone would like to know more, they can find me online at MikeYoungNY.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the audience and those that are online that are watching. The questions you asked tonight, are very important to our city in moving us forward, and as well as sharing the ideas. But I think really we need to ask the audience and those who are online and those who are listening, the real questions. At this critical point in our city's history right now, the deficit that we're facing, the poor ratings that we have, the crime, the lack of economic development, the poor school systems, the overwhelming number of houses that are abandoned and boarded up, as well as foreclosed, we really got to ask ourselves a question. At this critical juncture, the person we elect, do we elect somebody that has no political experience whatsoever and put them in that most powerful position in that seat? We also have to ask, do we have to elect somebody who's part of the problem, part of the chaos, part of part of the madness that can't get things done? Do we really want to elect somebody who doesn't know which direction to really go in? Do we really want to elect somebody who's going to be the mayor's boy or the mayor's, puppet moving forward? Or is this person like myself, be party neutral, to be able to look at the issues, to be able to balance the power between the Common Council and the mayor's office, to be able to get things done? Do we really want to elect somebody who's been there, done that, and got the t-shirt for it? I've been there when the city has some tough times, as well as I have the experience, more so than either one of them combined put together, as well as the budgetary expertise and skill sets combined and put together, who has balanced budgets over and over when I was chair of the Finance Committee. I remember they were about to lay off the garbage workers and instill a garbage collection fee. Hard work with the council members, we were able to save the employees' jobs as well as get rid of the garbage collection fees.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
We would like to thank all the candidates for your time and participation this evening. If you'd like to show your appreciation to the candidates, now is a good time. As you can tell, there are several important issues in this race. We hope tonight's forum has been able to give you, the voters, an opportunity to understand the positions and agendas of each of the candidates, and that you may be able to make an informed decision when you go to the polls on November 7th.
Thank you again to Hudson Valley News Network for making this event possible. HVNN.com, our local online TV news and entertainment network. And thanks to our friends here at the Change Point Theater for their hospitality, and both of our sponsors for tonight, Rose & Kiernan, as well as Fortress Financial Advisory.
And we'd like to thank you, Frank, and the Chamber staff for all you do to benefit regional business in our community. And thank you all who came out tonight to listen and take part in our forum.
Let's have another round of applause for our three candidates. Thank you for your willingness to lead. And thank you, viewers, for joining us tonight.
So now that you're informed, make sure you get out and vote on November 7th. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.